how I coach it, push-ups. The push-ups very similar to the plank, and I actually use the cue, think about a moving plank while coaching push-ups. Just to review our traditional starting stance, and I think with push-ups, people really overthink where your hands should go, where your feet should go, etc. I know there's a lot of debate on like how much armpit angle you should have. The general gist that I tell all the people that I work with is, if you're in a position where your shoulder blades start to come up towards your ears, you're probably not giving your shoulders enough space to perform the movement. This is going to be dependent on how long your arms are. This is also going to be dependent on if you're working from a deficit, from an incline, whatever it may be. So general rule of thumbs is I say your thumbs should be just outside shoulder width apart. If you were laying on the ground, you'd put your hands just under your collarbone. Your thumbs would be about touching the collarbone, but that thumb width away, that's about where you'd want to be. In that position, my wrists would be under my elbows. My elbows would be coming away from my arms at about 35 to 45 degrees. Now, could you do 90 degrees? Sure. But in that time, 90 degrees, you want to make sure you're not shrugging the shoulders up. That scapular elevation is going to put a lot of tension on the neck. It's not going to feel good, and that's one of the big things I look for when coaching people through push-ups. So my hands are going to be about thumb width away from my body, so maybe just wider than that plank position in previous videos you've seen me demonstrate. And then for my feet, what I really want to do is keep my ankles and knees together. And the reasoning is similar to the plank. I want to create tension from the ground up, and in this case from my feet up, so that my hips and my core can be in a good alignment and I'm not flopping like a fish or doing like a breakdancing move trying to do a push-up. So full rep would be hands shoulder width apart. I'm going to keep my ankles and feet together, come up. Just like the plank position, I'm going to position my wrists underneath my armpits so that as I come down, my arms track backwards towards my body and then up and away. Now, if that's uncomfortable for you, your wrists, maybe you don't have the right extension, or your shoulders start to feel pinchy, I would recommend two things. One, elevate your wrists onto something. One thing that's super common in fitness is to use dumbbells to keep your wrists in a neutral position. I think sometimes people think the dumbbells do a little bit more than they do, but what I'm able to achieve with the dumbbells is more of a neutral stance where if I'm holding onto the dumbbell, my thumb and pointer finger keep a good alignment in my wrists. If you lack wrist extension, and you can see from this position, I have about 90 degrees. If you're looking like this or like this, push-ups from the floor are going to push your hands too far back. That's just not going to feel very good. So these dumbbells, as I'm coming in, and you can kind of see from this position here, if this was to be my hand on the outside, my forearm and elbow now stays in a good position. I think a lot of people think that the dumbbell adds depth, and I don't really think that that's something that's necessary. I think once you achieve about 90 degrees in your elbow to shoulder, that you're probably going low enough. So when you do use dumbbells and you are elevated, you do need to be mindful of the depth. I can turn my dumbbells in slightly to accommodate a better wrist position. I come up into my tall plank hold. I'm going to lower, tracking my elbows down, and then I'm going to push up, performing the same barrier, same movement that we just did, making sure that my wrists are just in a neutral position. The second thing, and I'll use these dumbbells as an example, if you have longer arms and you're feeling like you're stretching your shoulders a little too much, you can use the dumbbells to kind of block off what your depth should be. In this case, I would set up over the dumbbells a foam pad, a block. If you have a yoga block, those work really well. You can alter it to have different heights. But the thing under your chest is just going to mark off how deep each rep should be. So I would set up over. I can either put it over my chest, over my belly, whatever might fit. And from this position now, as I come down, that dumbbell serves as a marker so I know where I need to be, whether that's for partial reps, just to monitor my full range of motion to make sure I'm not going too low. It also serves as a really good cue if you're doing some type of pause push-up reps as well. So quick recap, we love angles. Wrists under the elbow, somewhere between 35 and 45 degrees in the armpit is going to be probably good for most. You could go wider as long as your shoulder blades aren't tracking up as you perform each rep. If you have wrist problems, wrist extension meaning if you can't get 90 degrees without being against the floor. Pushing your hand against the floor is probably going to creak your elbows, probably creak your wrists up a little bit. Use dumbbells to achieve that neutral wrist position. The other thing you can do if you have longer limbs, maybe there it's a little bit too much of a stretch on the shoulder, you can use an implement, dumbbells, yoga block, foam pad, whatever it may be, to just mock up how far down you should be on each rep. And that really covers just the general setup. Now, a couple other things that I want to talk about in this video that a lot of people ask questions on is where and how do I add weight? And should I use a band? Should I use a chain? Should I use a plate? Well, one, you should probably use whatever you have. That's common sense. Two, similar to the plank video that I had up on the site, if you're going to use a band, notice that I'm freeing my shoulder blades. Anytime you load this movement, the push-up movement, you want to make sure your upper back is in a position that it can still move freely. If we're in a position where we can't fully extend our upper back, hopefully you can see in that video, like if I'm pinned here, that's going to hurt my shoulders over the long term. I want to be able to fully reach my shoulder blades to the ceiling. That band and that open setup will be able to do that. Likewise, if you're using chains or a plate, setting that plate up across your lower back, kind of the top of your butt into your lower back, is going to do two things. One, similar to the plank, I'm going to get some feedback on where my lower back positioning is and if I should have it pushed into the implement that I'm using. Two, it frees those shoulder blades. So my shoulder blades can still move and I can still achieve a full range. If you're using chains, I know you'll see a lot of people putting them over their shoulders. I guess you can, but a better placement is going to be lengthwise over your lower back. If you could see, like if this band was acting as a chain, I'm just going to lay them across my lower back so that the chains can still hit the ground and give me that resistance off the floor, but I'm still in a position where now I can have a little bit more shoulder stability and that full range of motion. So when loading, just make sure you can still achieve the movement out of the shoulder blades that you can do. What I like to do, and I'm going to talk real quick about just some coaching progressions, because a lot of people ask, can I do push-ups from my knees? Should I do push-ups from an incline? The answer is yes. Whatever you can do to achieve the motion, I think you're doing something well. So if you're doing push-ups from the floor, that same setup is still applicable, where your hands go. The only thing that's going to be different is your knees are going to be the point of contact with the ground, not your toes. So when you set up, you're going to have that same ankle-knee relationship pushing together. My knees are going to push together, and then I'm going to set up in this partial length, and I'm going to perform the same rep. And this is fine. I think that push-ups from your knees is a great place to start, and there's a lot of really good things you can do from push-ups on your knees. One being a rock back push-up, where you're set up in a quadruped, you rock back and get a really good stretch through the shoulder blades, and then you come up and finish in a push-up. And two, you can now work from that partial body length from your knees to a negative push-up. So a lot of times I start push-ups from the knees, two, rock back push-ups, and then three, we take that rock back, we start to work into an elevated rock back. If you can see where this is going to be now, my hands are on my knees. A rock back for my knees is going to be rock. I come forward to my knees, and then I go into my push-up. From this position, I'm getting a good angle here for the camera, I'm going to be from my toes, which starts to get me to work from my full body length. I rock back, I come forward, and then I can come down in a controlled negative to the floor, use my knees to catch myself, pop back up, and that's a good progression to get from your knees to your toes, and then to an incline, working off of a bench, a plyo box, whatever you may have, a barbell set up on a rack, and then that incline goes down and you're doing push-ups from the floor. It's all a progression, but a lot of people ask where to start. I just say start where you're comfortable, and once you achieve the intensity you're looking for, or it starts to feel easy, you have more confidence with the movement, then you can start to progress forward. But there is no wrong place to start. Start whatever's comfortable for you. So that's push-ups. That's how I coach it, from setup to adding implements, sets, reps. Ooh, didn't talk sets and reps. Should probably add that in there. What's great about push-ups is they're self-limiting. At some point, you're not going to be able to push yourself up off the floor. So what I like to do when I program push-ups is actually do a little bit more volume with that exercise. Volume meaning a little bit more sets and a little bit more reps than you're probably thinking. I know we're used to 4 sets of 6, 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 12. I'll actually go as far as programming off of a strategy called reps in reserve, where you're leaving reps in the tank. So I might program 2 sets of max reps, thinking about leaving 2 reps in reserve. What that would look like is you would perform push-ups. All of a sudden you get to maybe 17, 18, 19 reps. You're like, it's getting really hard. I'm at 20, 21 reps. I probably could only do a couple more. That's where you stop that set. And you record the total number of reps performed, and that way you're able to increase volume over time. When you're working from partial positions like your knees or modified variations like a rock back push-up, to do something like 3 sets of 6, 3 sets of 10 probably isn't going to be enough volume, especially on a self-limiting exercise like a push-up, where you're going to give out on your ability to push yourself up rather than lowering yourself down. Probably a whole nother video to talk about that coming up at some point. But when you're programming these, you can probably do more than you think as far as total work, but you probably should just make sure you're doing them in a position you feel confident with. And that's, again, I go back to, should you do push-ups from your knees? Should you do negative reps? Should you do incline push-ups? Yes, if you feel confident with it, absolutely do it, and then just do more of them until you get to the point where you feel comfortable going back to a new position or working out of a little bit more of a traditional volume, sets, reps setup. That's push-ups. That's how I coach them. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next